Marcus Chun had not smiled in 2 years. He had forgotten how. The muscles in his face that once pulled his lips upward had gone stiff and cold, like machinery left too long without use. He did not care. Smiling was for people who had something to smile about, and Marcus had nothing. 2 years ago, the Kepler station disaster had taken everything from him. His wife, Lena, his daughter, Sophie, 3,000 other people, gone in a flash of light when the orbital station's reactor failed. Marcus had been on a supply run that day. He had kissed his daughter goodbye that morning and promised to bring her back a star crystal from the trading post. He never got the chance. Now he lived alone on Hestia 7, a small moon on the outer edge of human space. Nobody came to Hestia 7. Nobody cared about it. The air was toxic, the weather was terrible, and the only thing of value was the junk that crashed there from passing ships. Marcus ran a salvage operation, picking through the wreckage of other people's misfortunes. It suited him. He was wreckage himself. His home was a simple habitat unit surrounded by mountains of scrap metal and broken ship parts. He had everything he needed to survive, and nothing he needed to live. He woke up, he worked, he ate, he slept. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Time meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. The storm came without warning, as storms on Hestia 7 often did. Methane winds howled across the salvage yard, throwing debris against the walls of his habitat. Marcus sat inside, drinking synthetic coffee and listening to the chaos outside. He had learned to ignore the storms. They could not hurt him any more than life. Already had dot, then he heard the crash dot. It was different from the usual sounds of the storm. Heavier, more final. Something had hit the ground hard, not far from his home. Marcus set down his coffee and looked at the door. He did not want to go outside. The storm was dangerous, and whatever had crashed was probably just another piece of space junk. Not worth the risk, but something made him stand up. Something pulled him toward the door. Maybe it was the old instincts from his days in the rescue corps, before Kepler, before everything fell apart. Maybe it was just curiosity. Whatever it was, Marcus found himself putting on his environment suit and stepping out into the toxic rain. The wind nearly knocked him down. He grabbed onto a piece of wreckage and pulled himself forward, step by step, toward the source of the crash. Through the yellow haze of the methane storm, he saw it, an escape pod, small and damaged, half buried in the mud of his salvage yard. Marcus approached carefully. The pod's hull was scorched and dented, marked with symbols he recognized immediately. Drethari, the Dragon People, humanity's enemies for the past 30 years. A Cold War that never quite turned hot, but never quite turned peaceful either. He should walk away. He should go back inside and pretend he never saw anything. If there were Drethari soldiers inside, they might kill him. If he reported them to the authorities, he would be doing his duty as a human citizen. Either way, this was not his problem. But Marcus did not walk away. Instead, he pried open the damaged hatch and looked inside. Two figures huddled together in the darkness of the pod. Not soldiers, not warriors, children. 2 young Drethari, their scales dull and their eyes wide with fear. The larger one, a female, placed herself between Marcus and the smaller one, a male. She bared her teeth in a weak attempt at a threat, but Marcus could see she was exhausted and scared. A translator device on her chest crackled to life. "Please," she said, her voice mechanical through the device, but somehow still desperate. "They will kill us if you send us back." Marcus stared at them. He should call the authorities. He should report this. It was the right thing to do, the safe thing to do. These were Drethari, the enemy. Their kind had been threatening human space for decades, but he looked at the smaller one, the male, hiding behind his sister. The young dragon was trembling, his damaged wing pressed against his body, his eyes full of a terror that Marcus understood too well. It was the look of someone who had lost everything and expected to lose what little remained. Marcus thought of Sophie. He thought of how she used to hide behind Lena whenever she was scared. He thought of all the things he would have done to protect her, all the lines he would have crossed, all the rules he would have broken. "Get inside," he said, his voice rough from months of disuse. "Before the storm gets worse." The female Drethry did not move at first. She watched him with suspicious eyes, trying to understand why a human would help them. Marcus did not explain. He simply turned and walked back toward his habitat, trusting them to follow or not. It was their choice. They followed. Inside the habitat, Marcus gave them blankets and water. The young dragons drank desperately, like they had not had water in days. Up close, Marcus could see how thin they were, how their scales had lost their shine, how the male's wing hung at a wrong angle. They were not just scared. They were starving. "What are your names?" Marcus asked. The female looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I am Kira. This is my brother Veth. I'm Marcus." He paused. "Why are they trying to kill you?" Kira's eyes darkened with pain. "Our father was Admiral Sorth. He spoke for peace with humans. The Dominion called him a traitor." Her voice cawed. "They executed him. And our mother. We were supposed to die too. But our father's friends helped us escape." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Something he had kept locked away for 2 years. These were not enemies. They were orphans. Children whose parents had been killed for wanting peace. Children with no home, no family, no place in the galaxy that would accept them. He looked at Veth, who was still watching him with those frightened eyes. The young dragon reminded him so much of Sophie in that moment that it hurt to breathe. "You can stay here," Marcus said. "For now. Until we figure something out." Kira's suspicious expression softened just slightly. "Why would you help us?" "We are Drethry. Your people hate us." Marcus turned away, looking out the window at the storm that still raged outside. "Maybe I'm tired of hating," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm just tired." That night, Marcus set up sleeping areas for the 2 young dragons in the corner of his habitat. He gave them more food and more water, and he checked Veth's damaged wing as best he could. He was not a doctor, but he could see the wing would never fully heal. The young dragon would never fly. When they finally fell asleep, curled together for warmth and comfort, Marcus sat in his chair and watched them. He did not know what he was doing. He did not know why he had brought them inside instead of turning them away. He only knew that for the first time in 2 years, his empty habitat did not feel quite so empty. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside, something new had begun. The first week was difficult. Kira watched Marcus like he was a predator waiting to strike. She positioned herself between him and Veth at all times, her body tense, her eyes never fully relaxing. Marcus understood. She was protecting her brother the only way she knew how. He had seen the same look in the eyes of soldiers who had lost too much. Veth was different. The young male was quiet and observant, watching everything Marcus did with curious eyes. When Marcus worked on salvage in the yard, Veth would sit nearby and study the machines and tools. He never spoke much, but his mind was clearly always working, always thinking. Marcus learned their story piece by piece over those first days. Their father, Admiral Sorth, had been a respected leader in the Drethry Dominion. He had commanded fleets and won battles. But he had also seen the cost of war, the waste of lives on both sides. He had begun to speak publicly about peace with humanity, about ending the conflict that had lasted for 3 decades. The Dominion did not want peace. The ruling council saw humans as inferior beings, useful only as enemies to unite the Drethry people. Admiral Sarth's words were dangerous, so they silenced him. Kira had been old enough to understand what was happening when the soldiers came for their family. Veth had been younger, confused, screaming for their mother as she was dragged away. Loyal officers had hidden the children and smuggled them off-world in an escape pod. But the pod was damaged during the escape. They had drifted for weeks before crashing on Hestia 7. "We have nowhere to go," Kira said one evening, her voice flat with exhaustion. "The Dominion wants us dead, and humans will never accept us. We are caught between two worlds that both reject us." Marcus thought about that. He understood what it meant to be caught between worlds. He'd been living in a space between life and death since Kepler, not truly alive, but not willing to die either. Just existing. Just waiting for something to change. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. Kira looked at him with those sharp yellow eyes. "Why? What do you want from us?" "Nothing," Marcus said. He paused, searching for words. "I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go." Days turned into weeks. The uneasy coexistence slowly became something else. Marcus began teaching Veth about salvage work, showing him how to identify valuable parts, how to repair damaged systems, how to bring dead machines back to life. The young dragon had a natural gift for it. His four-fingered hands were precise and steady, and he understood technology in a way that surprised Marcus. "This power coupling is inefficient," Veth said one day, examining a piece of equipment Marcus had just repaired. "If you reroute the energy flow through a secondary channel, you could increase output by 30%. Marcus looked at the coupling, then at Veth. The young dragon was right. Marcus had been repairing salvage for years, but he had never thought of that modification. He made the change, and it worked exactly as Veth had predicted. "Where did you learn that?" Marcus asked. Veth's scales flushed slightly, the Drethry version of a blush. "I did not learn it. I just see how things could work better. My father said I had an engineer's mind." The young dragon's voice grew quiet. "He said I would build great things someday." Marcus put a hand on Veth's shoulder. It was the first time he had touched either of the dragons since bringing them inside. He was right. "You will." Kira's transformation was slower but equally surprising. She discovered Marcus's small food preparation area and took over the cooking duties with fierce determination. Her first attempts at human food were disasters. She burned the protein cubes, oversalted the vegetables, and somehow made coffee that tasted like engine fluid. But she refused to give up. "Drethry do not fail," she announced after her third ruined meal. "We adapt and overcome." Marcus found himself smiling at that. Just a small smile, barely a twitch of his lips. But it was the first time his face had made that movement in 2 years. Over time, Kira's cooking improved. She began experimenting, combining human ingredients with Drethry techniques. The results were strange, but surprisingly good. She even started giving her creations names, presenting each meal with a formal announcement that made Veth roll his eyes and Marcus hide his amusement. "This is called Human Drethry Fusion Stew No. 7, she would say, placing the bowl in front of Marcus with great ceremony. "It is my finest work yet." It was never her finest work. The next one was always better. But Marcus ate every meal she made and thanked her for each one. He had learned that Kira expressed care through food, the same way Veth expressed it through fixing things. They were both trying to earn their place, to prove they were worth the risk Marcus had taken. They did not understand that they had already proven it simply by being there. One evening, Marcus was sitting outside the habitat, watching the stars through Hestia 7's thin atmosphere. Veth came and sat beside him, his damaged wing folded carefully against his back. "Can I ask you something?" Veth said. "Sure. Why do you live alone here?" Do you not have a family? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He had not talked about Lena and Sophie since they died. The words were locked inside him, too painful to release. But something about Veth's gentle question made them come out. I had a family, Marcus said slowly. A wife and a daughter. They died 2 years ago in an accident. After that, I came here. I did not want to be around people anymore. I did not want to feel anything anymore. Veth was silent, processing this. Then he said, Do you still feel that way? Marcus thought about the question. A month ago, the answer would have been yes. He had wanted nothing but emptiness, nothing but silence, nothing but the slow passage of days until he finally stopped existing. But now, no, he admitted. I think maybe I don't. Veth made a soft sound, the Drethary equivalent of a sigh. I am glad. Kira and I. We were afraid you would send us away, but you did not. You let us stay. You taught me things. You eat Kira's terrible cooking without complaining. Her cooking is getting better, Marcus said. It is still terrible, Veth replied. And there was a hint of humor in his mechanical translator voice. But she tries very hard. That is what matters. Marcus looked at the young dragon sitting beside him. Veth had lost so much, his parents, his ability to fly. But he was still here, still trying, still finding reasons to keep going. There was a strength in that which Marcus had not recognized before. You know, Marcus said, your father would be proud of you. Both of you. You survived. You kept each other safe. That is not easy. Veth's eyes grew bright with emotion. Thank you, he said quietly. That means much to me. They sat together in silence after that, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, two species were locked in a cold war that had lasted for decades. Somewhere out there, people hated each other for nothing more than the shape of their bodies or the color of their scales. But here, on this small forgotten moon, a human and a dragon sat side by side and found peace in each other's company. The next morning, Marcus set 3 places at the breakfast table without thinking about it. It was only when Kira and Veth sat down across from him that he realized what he had done. 3 plates, 3 cups, 3 chairs. A family dot. It was Veth who noticed the change first. You smiled, he said, his translator giving the words an almost wondering tone. I did not know humans could do that with their faces. Marcus touched his own mouth, surprised. He had smiled. A real smile, not forced or faked, but natural and genuine. The muscles in his face remembered how to work after all. Neither did I, Marcus said. Not anymore. But apparently, he could. And sitting there with Kira and Veth, eating Kira's slightly burned breakfast and listening to Veth explain his latest engineering idea, Marcus thought that maybe he would keep smiling for a while. 3 months had passed since the escape pod crashed into Marcus's salvage yard. 3 months of shared meals and engineering lessons. 3 months of Kira's improving cooking and Veth's brilliant inventions. 3 months of healing, slow but steady, for all 3 of them. Marcus had almost forgotten what danger felt like. Hestia 7 was so far from everything, so forgotten by both human and Drethary civilization, that he had begun to believe they were safe. He should have known better. Safety was an illusion, and illusions always shattered eventually. The ship appeared on a clear morning, cutting through the thin atmosphere like a knife. Marcus saw it from the salvage yard, where he was working with Veth on restoring an old atmospheric processor. His blood went cold when he recognized the design. Drethary hunter-class vessel, fast, deadly, and equipped for one purpose, tracking down prey. Get inside, Marcus said to Veth, his voice calm despite the fear rising in his chest. Find Kira. Both of you stay hidden. Veth looked up at the approaching ship, and Marcus saw the terror in his eyes. The young dragon knew exactly what that ship meant. "They found us," he whispered. "I know. Go. Now." Veth ran for the habitat, his damaged wing bouncing awkwardly against his back. Marcus watched him go, then turned to face the ship as it landed in the salvage yard. His hand moved to his belt, where a small plasma pistol hung. It was an old weapon, barely functioning. Against trained Drethari warriors, it would be useless. But Marcus grabbed it anyway. 3 figures emerged from the ship. Drethari warriors in full combat harnesses, their scales gleaming with embedded armor, their eyes cold and predatory. They moved with the confidence of hunters who had never failed to catch their prey. The lead warrior was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with scars crossing his snout and a ceremonial blade strapped to his back. He looked at Marcus the way someone might look at an insect, with contempt and mild curiosity. "Human," the warrior said, his translator giving his words a harsh edge. "You have something that belongs to the Dominion." Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between the warriors and his habitat. "I don't know what you're talking about." The warrior's lips pulled back, revealing rows of sharp teeth. It was not a smile. It was a threat. "Do not play games with me, Softskin. We've tracked the hatchlings to this moon. We know they're here. Surrender them, and we will leave your miserable world in peace." "There are no hatchlings here," Marcus said. "Just me and a lot of junk." "You've wasted your time." The second warrior, smaller and faster-looking, stepped forward. "He lies. I can smell them. They are close." Marcus's grip tightened on his plasma pistol. He knew he could not win this fight. 3 trained warriors against 1 aging salvager with a broken gun. The math was simple and deadly. But he thought of Kira and Veth hiding in the habitat, terrified, waiting to be dragged back to their deaths. He thought of Sophie and how he had not been there to protect her when it mattered. He would not fail again. "Those children are under my protection," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "If you want them, you'll have to go through me." The lead warrior laughed. It was an ugly sound, full of mockery. "You? 1 human against 3 warriors of the Dominion? You are either brave or stupid." "Probably both," Marcus admitted. "But that doesn't change anything." The warrior drew his blade. "So be it. The Dominion rewards us for the hatchlings, dead or alive. They said nothing about the human who sheltered them. I will enjoy killing you." Marcus could have run. He could have tried to negotiate. He could have done many things that might have kept him alive a little longer. Instead, he did something that surprised even himself. He attacked first. The plasma pistol fired twice, hitting the smallest warrior in the chest. The shots barely penetrated the armor, but they created a distraction. Marcus used that moment to slam his hand against a control panel on the nearest pile of salvage. The defense grid came online. For 30 years, Marcus had been collecting military salvage. Broken weapons, damaged turrets, defunct security systems. He had repaired them slowly, 1 piece at a time, as a way to keep his hands busy during the long silent nights. He had never expected to use them. But now, the salvage yard came alive with targeting lasers and the hum of charging weapons. The warriors scattered as plasma. Fire erupted from multiple directions. Marcus dove behind a stack of metal plates, rolling to avoid a blade that sliced through the air where his head had been. The fight became chaos. Flashing lights, explosions, the roar of weapons, and the screech of tearing metal. Marcus was not a soldier. He had been rescue corps, trained to save lives rather than take them. But he had learned things in those years that served him now. How to move in dangerous environments. How to use terrain to his advantage. How to keep fighting when every part of his body screamed at him to stop. A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder. The pain was blinding, white-hot, but Marcus did not fall. He kept moving, kept firing, kept triggering defensive weapons. The smallest warrior went down first, overwhelmed by turret fire. The second warrior followed, caught by a trap Marcus had set months ago and forgotten about. That left a leader. The massive Drethry came through the chaos like a force of nature, shrugging off plasma fire that would have killed lesser beings. His blade cut through two turrets like they were made of paper. His eyes were fixed on Marcus with absolute hatred. "You die now, human," the warrior growled. Slowly, Marcus's plasma pistol was empty. His shoulder was bleeding badly. He could barely stand. But he did not run. He picked up a piece of scrap metal and held it like a weapon, facing the warrior who towered over him. "Maybe," Marcus said, "but I'll make it cost you." The warrior lunged. Marcus dodged, too slow, and felt the blade slice across his ribs. The pain drove him to his knees. But as the warrior raised his blade for the killing blow, Marcus drove his piece of scrap metal upward, jamming it into the gap between the warrior's chest plates. The warrior staggered, surprise crossing his face. It was not a fatal wound, but it was enough to create an opening. Marcus grabbed the warrior's fallen pistol and fired point-blank into his enemy's face. Silence. Marcus lay in the mud of his salvage yard, surrounded by the bodies of 3 Drethry warriors. His shoulder was burned. His ribs were cut. He was losing blood faster than he could afford to lose it. But he was alive, and the warriors were not. He heard running footsteps and looked up to see Kira and Veth rushing toward him. Kira's face was twisted with fear and something else. Something that looked like love. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him. "You're badly hurt." "I've had worse," Marcus lied. Veth was already examining the wounds, his engineer's mind calculating treatment options. "We need to get him inside. I can adapt the medical supplies for human biology, but we must move quickly." Kira helped Marcus to his feet, taking his weight on her shoulder despite his protests. As they walked toward the habitat, she spoke in a voice thick with emotion. "You could have died," she said. "You almost did die." "For us. Why?" Marcus thought about the question. He thought about Lena and Sophie. He thought about 2 years of emptiness, of wanting nothing, of waiting to fade away. And he thought about the 2 young dragons who had crashed into his life and given him something to protect again. "Because you're worth it," he said simply. "Both of you. You're worth everything." Kira did not respond with words, but she held him tighter, and Veth pressed close to his other side, and together they made their way home. The salvage yard was a mess. The defense grid was mostly destroyed. Marcus's blood stained the mud, and the bodies of 3 warriors lay among the wreckage. But the habitat was safe. The family was safe. And Marcus, despite the pain, despite the blood loss, despite everything, smiled. Word spread faster than Marcus expected. In the vast emptiness of space, news traveled through trading ships and communication relays, passed from station to station like whispers in a crowded room. A human had sheltered Drethry refugees. A human had fought Dominion hunters and won. One man, alone on a forgotten moon, had stood against 3 warriors and lived to tell about it. Some people called Marcus a traitor. They sent angry messages through the CUM system, calling him names, threatening violence, demanding that he turn over the alien children he was protecting. These people remembered 30 years of Cold War, 30 years of fear and hatred, and they could not understand why any human would help the enemy. But other people called him something else. They remembered the Kepler station disaster, when a Drethry ship had been the first to respond to the distress signal. The ship had tried to help with rescue operations, only to be turned away by human commanders who did not trust alien assistance. 300 people died who might have been saved if that help had been accepted. These people understood that enemies could become friends, that hatred was a choice. And that kindness crossed all boundaries. 6 months after the Hunter attack, the first refugee arrived at Hestia 7. His name was Torak, an elderly Drethari who had been a friend of Admiral Soreth. He had spoken too loudly about the wrongness of the executions and had been marked for punishment. He arrived in a damaged shuttle, barely alive, and Marcus took him in without question. Kira was suspicious at first. She remembered Torak from her childhood, but trust did not come easily to her anymore. It was Veth who welcomed the old dragon, helping him settle into the habitat, asking questions about their father, listening to stories of better times. "Your father was a great man," Torak told them one evening. "He saw a future where Drethari and humans could live in peace. He died for that vision. But visions do not die with the dreamers. They live on in those who remember." More refugees followed. Not just Drethari, but others as well. A Veluxi family arrived, fleeing religious persecution on their homeworld. Their kind had been classified as lesser beings by their own species' ruling class, unworthy of basic rights. A Tyrellian engineer named Drex came next, branded as contaminated because he had worked alongside humans during a joint mining operation. His own people had cast him out, and he had nowhere else to go. Then came the humans, veterans of conflicts past, men and women who had lost as much as Marcus had. They had drifted through space without purpose, seeking something they could not name, until they heard about the strange settlement on Hestia 7, a place where species did not matter. A place where damaged souls could find healing. Marcus had not planned any of this. He had only wanted to be left alone with his grief. But somehow, his salvage yard had become a sanctuary, and he found himself at the center of something bigger than himself. Veth took charge of construction. The young dragon's engineering mind saw possibilities everywhere, and he designed housing units that could accommodate a dozen different species' needs. Drethari needed warmer temperatures, so he built heating systems. Veluxi needed lower gravity, so he created specialized living quarters. Humans needed open spaces, so he designed common areas where everyone could gather. "We are building something new," Vith said one day, looking out at the growing settlement. "Something that has never existed before." Kira became the unofficial arbiter of disputes. Her fierce protectiveness, once focused only on Veth, expanded to include everyone in the community. When arguments arose, when cultural misunderstandings created tension, Kira was there to mediate. She had a way of cutting through nonsense and finding the truth beneath the conflict. "You are both being idiots," she would say, regardless of who was fighting. "Stop acting like children and solve your problem." It was not diplomatic, but it was effective. Marcus found himself laughing more often. Real laughter, the kind that came from deep in his chest and shook his whole body. He laughed at Kira's terrible jokes. He laughed at Veth's engineering failures, which were few but spectacular when they happened. He laughed at the sight of a Veluxi child trying to teach a Drethari elder how to play a human card game. One evening, Marcus sat on the roof of his original habitat, watching the settlement that had grown around it. Lights glowed in a dozen different windows. He could hear the sounds of conversation in multiple languages, the clatter of shared meals, the occasional burst of laughter. It was chaos, beautiful chaos, and it was his. Veth climbed up to join him, moving carefully because of his damaged wing. The young dragon had grown in the past year, his scales finally regaining their healthy shine. He was not the terrified child who had hidden behind his sister in the escape pod. He was becoming something else, a leader, a builder, a dreamer. "Can I ask you something?" Veth said, settling beside Marcus. "You always do." Veth made the Drethari sound of amusement. "Why did you help us?" "That first night, when we crashed, we were your enemies. You had every reason to turn us away, but you did not." Marcus thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing many times. "I think I was tired of being empty," he said finally. "When I lost my family, I thought that meant I had nothing left. I thought the only thing I could do was wait to die. But then you and Kira crashed into my life, and I saw something in you that I recognized." "What did you see?" "Two people who had lost everything but refused to stop fighting. Two people who protected each other even when there was no hope." Marcus looked at Veth. "You reminded me that survival is not enough. Living means something more. It means having people you care about, people you would fight for." Veth was quiet for a moment. "You gave us a home when we had none. You gave me a purpose. You gave Kira someone to protect besides me." He paused. "You gave us a family." "No," Marcus said softly. "You gave me one." I had forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone. I had forgotten what it meant to wake up with a reason to face the day. You two reminded me. They sat in silence after that, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, wars continued. Hatred still divided species from species. Politicians made speeches about the dangers of alien influence, and generals plotted battles that would kill thousands. The galaxy was as broken as ever. But here, on this small forgotten moon, something different was happening. Different species lived side by side, sharing meals and stories and dreams. Children of all kinds played together, not caring about the color of scales or the shape of hands. Old soldiers found peace, and young engineers built futures that it was not perfect. Arguments still happened. Cultural clashes still caused problems. Sometimes Marcus wanted to lock himself in his room and pretend none of it was his responsibility. But he never did, because every time he thought about giving up, he would see Kira's proud face as she served another terrible meal, or Veth's excited chatter about a new invention, or the smile of a refugee who had finally found safety. That was worth everything. That was worth any amount of trouble. Kira joined them on the roof, carrying 3 cups of something warm. "You two are being dramatic again," she said, handing out the drinks. "Sitting on rooftops, staring at stars, having emotional conversations. Very human behavior. We learned it from the best," Veth replied. Kira settled between them, and for a long moment, none of them spoke. They just sat together, 3 unlikely family members under an alien sky, grateful for what they had found. "I never thought I would feel safe again," Kira said quietly. "After our parents died, I thought safety was an illusion. But here, with you." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Marcus put an arm around her shoulders, then around Veth's. They leaned into him, these 2 young dragons who had crashed into his life and changed everything. His children, in every way that mattered. "We are safe," Marcus said. "We are home. And we are together. That is all that matters." Below them, the settlement continued its quiet evening routines. Above them, the stars shone cold and bright. And in that moment, surrounded by the family he had never expected to find, Marcus Chen felt something he had not felt in years. He felt complete. 3 years after 2 young dragons crashed into his salvage yard, Marcus Chen stood on a hillside overlooking his settlement. What had once been a lonely scrapyard was now a thriving community of over 200 souls. Humans, Dretheri, Veluxi, Terrellians, and others lived and worked together in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. The news had come that morning, delivered by a diplomatic courier. Representatives from both the Dretheri Dominion and the United Human Territories wanted to meet. Not on a warship, not on a neutral space station. They wanted to meet here, on Hestia 7, in the settlement that had proven peace was possible. Marcus did not know how to feel about it. Part of him was proud that his small moon had become a symbol of hope. Another part was afraid that diplomats and politicians would ruin everything they had built. He had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and his instincts told him that powerful people rarely brought anything good. Kira found him on the hillside, her scales gleaming in the morning light. She was no longer the desperate teenager who had begged for shelter. She had grown into a confident young woman, respected by everyone in the settlement for her wisdom and her fierce dedication to justice. "You're worried," she said, standing beside him. "I'm always worried." Kira made the Dratheri sound of dismissal. "You're worried more than usual. I can tell by the way you're standing." Marcus smiled despite himself. Kira could read him better than anyone, sometimes better than he could read himself. What if they don't want peace? What if this is just politics, and they don't actually care about what we've built here? Then we show them, Kira said simply. We show them what we've created, and we let them see that it works. If they choose to ignore it, that is their failure, not ours. She was right, of course. She usually was. Marcus reached out and squeezed her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the years. Father and daughter, in every way that mattered. The diplomatic ships arrived 3 days later. The Dratheri vessel was sleek and elegant, covered in symbols of status and power. The human ship was more practical, built for efficiency rather than beauty. They landed side by side in the designated area, and their passengers emerged with the careful movements of people expecting hostility. They did not find hostility. They found children of different species playing a game together, laughing as they chased a ball between houses of varied designs. They found a market where Dratheri merchants traded goods with human vendors, both sides haggling in the universal language of commerce. They found a community that worked, despite everything that should have made it fail. Ambassador Chun from the human side, no relation to Marcus, looked around with undisguised shock. "This is not what I expected," she admitted. "What did you expect?" Marcus asked. "Conflict, tension, at best, forced coexistence." The ambassador shook her head. "But this looks like home," Beth said, appearing beside Marcus. "It looks like home because that is what it is. For all of us." The Dratheri ambassador, a scarred veteran named Korath, studied Veth with careful eyes. "You are the son of Admiral Sorth. I knew your father. He was a dreamer." "He was," Beth agreed. "And his dream is being built here, one day at a time." The negotiations took weeks. They were difficult, as negotiations always were when decades of hatred had to be addressed. There were arguments and accusations, old wounds reopened and examined under the harsh light of diplomacy. More than once, Marcus thought the whole process would collapse into failure. But every time the talks stalled, the diplomats would look out the windows at his settlement. They would see a Dratheri elder teaching a human child how to sculpt metal. They would see a Veluxi family sharing a meal with a Turellian engineer. They would see veterans of both sides, former enemies, sitting together and sharing stories of the wars they had survived. It was hard to argue that peace was impossible when proof of its possibility was right. Outside the window, Kira served as one of the translators during the negotiations. Her unique upbringing, raised by both Dratheri parents and a human guardian, gave her insight into both cultures that no professional diplomat could match. She understood the pride that drove the Dratheri and the fear that motivated the humans. She could bridge gaps that seemed unbridgeable. "You are both scared," she said during one particularly tense session. "The Dratheri are scared of losing their honor and position. The humans are scared of being overwhelmed and forgotten. But fear does not have to control you. My brother and I were terrified when we crashed on this moon. We had every reason to expect death. Instead, we found family." The ambassadors listened. They did not agree immediately, but they listened. And slowly, session by session, the shape of a treaty began to emerge. The Treaty of Hestia was signed on a clear afternoon. with the settlement gathered to witness history being made. Marcus watched from the back of the crowd, trying to stay out of the spotlight. This was not about him. This was about something bigger, something that would outlast all of them. But the diplomats would not let him hide. Ambassador Chun called him forward, and Ambassador Korath did the same. They wanted him to speak, to add his voice to the official record of this moment. Marcus had never been good with speeches. He preferred action over words, work over talk. But he stepped forward anyway, looking out at the crowd of different faces and different forms, all watching him with expectation. "I'm not a diplomat," he began. "I'm not a politician or a leader. I'm just a man who lost everything and found something new in unexpected places. 3 years ago, 2 young dragons crashed into my salvage yard, and I made a choice to help them instead of turning them away. It wasn't a grand plan. It wasn't a political statement. I just saw 2 scared kids who needed shelter, and I remembered what it felt like to be alone and afraid." He paused, looking at Kira and Veth in the crowd. They smiled back at him, encouraging him to continue. "We're all just people trying to survive," Marcus said. "Different shapes, different worlds, different ways of thinking. But we all want the same things. Safety for our families. Purpose in our lives. Someone to share a meal with at the end of the day. Those things don't belong to any one species. They belong to everyone." He gestured at the settlement around them. "This place isn't special because of me. It's special because everyone here decided to see each other as people instead of enemies. It's special because we chose to build something together instead of tearing each other apart. The treaty you're signing today is just the beginning. The real work is what comes next, choosing, every day, to keep building instead of destroying." The applause that followed surprised him. It came from all sides, from humans and Drethri and everyone else gathered to witness the moment. Marcus felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. He had never been comfortable with attention. But then he felt Kira's hand on one shoulder and Veth's on the other, and the embarrassment faded. His family was with him. That was all that mattered. That night, after the diplomats had departed and the celebrations had quieted, Marcus visited a small memorial he had built on the edge of the settlement. It was a simple stone marker with 2 names carved into it, Lena Chun and Sophie Chun, his wife and daughter, gone now for 5 years. He knelt beside the marker and let himself cry for the first time in a long while. Not tears of grief, though there was grief in them. Tears of healing. Tears of change. Tears of a man who had finally learned that moving forward did not mean forgetting what had been lost. Kira and Veth found him there, as he knew they would. They did not speak. They simply stood with him, one on each side, until the tears stopped and the stars came out. "I wish they could have met you," Marcus said finally. "They would have been proud," Kira replied. "Not of us. Of what you became." Marcus looked at his adopted children, these 2 impossible beings who had changed everything. He thought about the salvage yard where they had first met, the storms and the battles and the quiet moments in between. He thought about the settlement that had grown from nothing, the treaty that might finally bring peace, the future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. "I think they would have liked you too," he said. "You're both stubborn as hell." Veth made his sound of amusement. This from the human who fought 3 warriors with a plasma burn in his shoulder. That's called persistence. It's different. It is exactly the same. And there, under the alien stars, surrounded by the family he had never expected to find, Marcus Chun laughed. It was a real laugh, full and warm and free. The kind of laugh he had forgotten he was capable of. The kind he had thought died with his first family, but it had not died. It had just been waiting for someone to bring it back. He had been given a reason to grin again. And as he stood there with his arms around Kira and Veth, watching the stars shine over the settlement they had built together, Marcus knew he would keep grinning for a very long time. The galaxy was still broken. Wars would still happen. Hatred would still exist. But here, on this small forgotten moon, something beautiful had been born. And it would grow and spread, and perhaps one day change everything. All because a grieving man had opened his door to two lost dragons on a stormy night. All because he had chosen love over fear.